should Marvel have a Crisis-style reboot? That's Joshua Williamson, everybody, current writer of Superman, which I think it's going to have its biggest year thanks to you yet.
Yeah, thank you.
What's rolling through this book. Right now, we're ensconced in Absolute Power. We're dealing with the fallout of Amanda Waller's War on Superheroes, the most recent episode or issue that just dropped at the taping of this episode. Also dropped, and I got to read it. It was really fun. Superman Zatana dealing with magic. I believe the issue is called I Hate Magic.
It's called I Hate Magic. Yeah, I think it's fun. It's called I Hate Magic. Yeah. I had to think, it's just, my brain is always like we talk about this a lot, and but my brain.
Oh yeah, no, you're like issues ahead
over here, So I'm always like, I have to be careful because even talking about Absolute Power, my brain is so beyond Absolute Power at this point that I'm like, wait, it's still coming out. Like, I don't like spoil anything. But yeah, this week's issue I really liked a lot. It was obviously getting to work with Jamal again. Jamal loves Zatana. We had talked about trying to find a place for Zatana. And when this event was coming together last year, I was like, well, this would be a perfect place for Zatana. And I talked with Jamal. And I love her. She's a great character. So it was fun putting her in. But then also it was like, the math of these 3 issues was so crazy because it was like, okay, I'm coming off a crossover, going into a crossover.
Right.
I have subplots that need to continue. We have big stuff coming in 19 with Dan Mora coming on board, and it's going to be, Doomsday and Superwoman and Time Trapper, and I have all these really big, crazy things coming. I don't want to make it feel so abrupt, but I also need 19 to feel like the beginning of a story, right? And so, but I can't ignore everything that happened before. So it was like these 3 issues was so. It was a crazy math to put it together, but it was really fun, and I knew Jamal would kill it. And writing Superman without powers for a few issues was fun.
Yeah,
and
putting him in that black suit was always fun.
That was my idea and my request because I was like, I sent this email and I remember because Jamal and I were going back and forth. Jamal was like, "Oh, can I have him? He has powers. Can he not have his cape? We get something different." And I was like, very quickly, I was like, black suit. Black suit,
silver bands.
Yeah, I was like, this is what I want. Black suit. It makes sense. And I was like, there's actually a story reason why, because that is his recovery suit.
Now, do you know any of the lore from the Jurgens era about I know that putting Superman in a black suit with a silver S is just rad, but do you know what the lore is behind them just going when we bring back Superman, mullet, black suit?
No, I don't. Do you?
Neither do I. No,
I'm gonna text Dan when we're done, and I'm just gonna.
Please do.
I love Dan. Dan,
right? Because where did that idea come from? Who was long hair? Who was black suit? I mean, it's so specific because it's a silhouette, but silver S, the silver toe on the boots is very specific.
You know what we should do? We should figure out. I'll text Dan. We should figure out a way to have Dan come on here with us, maybe in the next month or so.
With the advent. With the advent of Doomsday, we should do a Death of Superman show.
Yeah,
I'm making a note.
Dude, I bought a Death of Superman shirt.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was gonna wear it to. I'm trying to remember if I brought it or not. I was gonna wear it in San Diego, and then I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember why. I might wear it in New York. I might wear it in New York, but it's the bloody Superman logo.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that shirt. They were selling it. I remember seeing characters in the the reign of the Superman period, selling Death of Superman shirts. And years ago, I want to say 10 years ago, the fledgling years of this channel, I went on eBay and I found one, original vintage from a comic shop, ordered it, wore it a couple times. It's flaking off. I'm like, okay, this is to go in storage.
That was why I got it. I feel like I have a copy of Death of Superman right behind me here.
A polybagged or
a polybagged one. I know
nice.
I know I have one in my office.
Yeah, I've got a few.
And 500, the white one. I have both those in here.
Yeah.
I should ask Dan because that is just listen, we were kids when that happened, and so when he came out wearing that freaking the black and silver, we were like, hell yeah, this is dope. I almost wish he had wore it longer. It's so funny how much iconic stuff they create in that moment. That is such an on fire Superman moment because you have the Reign of Superman stuff. Doomsday was super cool. They created probably some of the more long lasting new iconic Superman stuff in that moment.
Just off the dome in like a vacuum in
Mhm.
response to Lois and Clark, the New Adventures of Superman, eating their lunch. Just going like, okay, fine. You know what? Let's kill Superman. And you know what? How we're going to kill Superman? Let's invent Doomsday. You know what? When
Yeah,
he's done, we still need to have 4 different Superman books coming out, 4 different Superman characters.
dude, so
Boom, boom,
good.
boom, boom,
It's
boom.
one of the
And like,
smartest.
yeah,
Like, I mean, it is a moment. It is a moment for the character, and it is arguably. I'm curious to how people respond to this. I think it is
yeah,
probably the last like biggest Superman moment.
easily.
We were talking about this when I was like, "What is the what are the coolest moments of comics?" Remember we were talking about this?
Yeah, yeah, those big
And
moments that like we
what are
can't.
those moments that you're like, it's not just iconic, but it's like that shit is cool. And we were like, Black Suit Spider-Man. Like
Hell
that
yeah.
is the moment that you're like, there is a before and after
Yep, yep.
for
Things will
certain
never be the
characters,
same again. Death of
right? Like,
Superman,
and the
Black Suit
mythology
Spider-Man.
of that suit is so
Yes.
crazy when you read Secret Wars and it's like this little black ball.
I know. Just yeah. Oh man,
It's
I can
crazy.
tell you,
Secret Wars is awesome. I love Secret Wars.
tracking down Secret Wars 8 and like reading it for the first time. I remember being
Mhm.
so in like I was excited but also disappointed. Where like it's just the last 2 pages. He's just like whoa, and then goes, I guess I'm inspired by what Spider Woman looks like, and I'm like, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, but then think about the mythology that comes out of that, like all the
Oh
stuff
my
they
god,
have now,
everything.
and now we're 3 movies into a Venom movie, right? And like the god of the symbiotes, like all this stuff is there, and it's like
Yeah,
little black ball,
little black ball. Nobody
no
knew
more
what it
seeds,
was.
just
No
this little
plan.
thing.
Yep.
Yeah, they were just like, we're doing this thing, but yeah, with Superman wearing the black armor with the silver, I actually don't know. I'm gonna ask Dan. Same thing with the listen. It's not a mullet.
No, it's just long hair. Like he
Well,
looks
because it's
like
funny
this
because I'm working on something with Bogdanov, not Bogdanov.
Bogdanov.
Yeah,
Bogdanov.
we're gonna butcher it. He's a very nice man.
He is.
I was emailing with him last week actually, and he wrote me a really nice compliment about really getting the Superman characters and really getting the supporting characters. And he was like, a lot of people don't get it, you get it. It's been really nice. And with Dan Jurgens, like Dan, he has an ownership over Doomsday. Like that's
It's his baby. Yeah.
baby. And so at San Diego, I ran into him, and I was like, "Hey, we'll text every once in a while. I really respect him a lot, and I really appreciate his perspective on things." And so I go to him, and I was like, "Hey, 2 things. One, I can't talk about on this right now because it's a spoiler for All In. But you know about it. You read All In, so you know what the
I
spoiler.
did. It's so it can we say it's awesome and it's like
Yeah, you can talk about.
it's
We just can't talk about what
exciting.
Yeah. I'm glad you liked it because I was like, I think you're one of the first people that I know that read it outside of our little circle. Like I
Yeah.
know retailers were reading it and they were liking it and stuff, and that's
Well,
always
they,
awesome to hear. But I
yeah,
think you're
yeah.
the first person that actually I knew that read it and it could, come at it from a
From a
completely
fan's perspective,
outside
it's just
perspective. I was. It was such a massive undertaking to get it right that by the time we were sending it to print, I was like, I never want to look at this again. And then I was just like, because it was doing a flip book and all the pieces, how the importance of it, all the characters, and but a few days later, I actually sat down and reread it. I was talking to Scott about this on Monday. I reread it and I was like, I'm really proud of this. I'm really happy with this. Like, I think all the character stuff works. As a DC book, it works. All these things
yep.
work. I'm really excited about it. But there's certain elements of it that obviously I talked to Dan about. So that was one part, and then I was like, Dan, here's my plans for Doomsday. Because he knew I was going to use Doomsday, but I'm like, here's the whole fucking thing. I'm just going to tell you the whole thing.
Right.
And I was like, here it is. Just unloaded the whole thing. And this is like in the lobby of the Marriott. Like I'm just
San Diego
like
Comic-Con, yeah.
unloading all this information at him. And because at first I was like, listen, I'll talk to you when we get home. I'll text you. We can get on the phone. We can talk about it. But then I was like, I was excited, and I'm like, fuck it. And I just told him the whole Doomsday plan, and then I remember, Dan is no joke. That dude is a vet in our industry, and he knows what's up. And I remember being like, so his opinion matters to me.
Sure.
I guess is what I'm trying to say. And he put his hand on my shoulder, and he gave me the like, you did it. I'm like, that's cool. That is good. Like, you did a good job. Like, he was like, he's like, a lot of people pitch me Doomsday stuff. This is one that I'm like, that actually makes a lot of sense. And he was like, that actually really tracks. Good job. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. And I had, and he told DC the same thing. He was like, "Oh, Josh told me the Doomsday Plan, and I approve." Basically, like, I was like, "Oh, I did
what a
it."
relief. Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of stuff with that. But yeah, I should ask Dan. We should try to find out. Maybe we could have him on here for something. Maybe when we do another live show, we can bring him on and ask him for the live show and see if we can get him to just talk about that suit, because I'd be curious. Oh, well, so here's the thing. So I was going back and I was looking at a lot of old Superman issues.
Yeah.
Like I'm always doing, like I always do as much research as possible on this stuff, and I always try to find different characters. And I told you before, whenever I write a character, the first thing I do is I find where that character appeared last.
Yes, like what were they last doing?
What were they
before
last
you took over?
Right? Because you never know; they might be in some other weird situation. And I'm not.
They could be dead. You don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. Like that's it's tough sometimes because it's like I just want to make sure I don't ignore what somebody else's work.
Right.
I think it's really disrespectful to completely blow away what someone else has done before, and at the very least give me like a through line.
Right.
Because sometimes characters can change, go through different stuff, and our interpretations of these characters can change. But I'm like, yeah, if that character is like, I'm gonna use a really bad example of something that I would never do, but let's say I had a book and Jack Knight showed up in it, and he's just Jack Knight, and I completely ignore the fact that he's like living in San Francisco, like super happy with the family. That would be wrong. Yeah. That would be wrong. You know what I mean? Like, no one's doing that, but that's the idea. I'm saying, it's like exactly. I would, if I were to have Jack Knight show up again, never happened. If I were to do something like that, I would 100% acknowledge that.
Totally.
But yeah, so I was looking at some stuff from Superman, and I was looking at a lot of John's art and a lot of stuff he was doing, and they're trying to bring this up. In those Superman books, whenever he's Clark Kent, he is 100% wearing a ponytail.
Yeah, like, 100% ponytail.
100% ponytail. That is not, and he has it all slicked back into a ponytail. That's not going to work if it's a mullet. Anyway, that's
no, you're right.
Of the hair.
Yeah,
I didn't mind the hair, but also that was a weird moment in comics where like everyone had some kind of extra thing. It was like Hal had the white temples. You know what I mean?
Hal had the white temples. Even Peter Parker had he had more of a mullet actually than.
Oh, he had long hair. Isn't that crazy? There was a moment where Spider-Man basically had like longish hair. Yeah. Remember when he was just straight up Spider-Man? He wasn't Peter Parker anymore, and he would just like, I think Mary Jane it was like a Rorschach moment, right? Because like Mary Jane comes into the kitchen and he's just like squatted on the table eating beans out of a jar or some shit. Like he's
that's right.
Do you know what I'm talking about? He has the mask pulled up. And he's
no, it's nuts. Yeah, that was That's after that's after he finds out like Aunt May's in the hospital because she had a stroke, and so he cocoons himself in their bedroom.
Oh yeah, what?
And then he emerges and he's the Spider, which is, by the way, why because like that's all DeMatteis, who's like,
you check out at some point. I know we always have this conversation. You come in and out, and I'm
no, I was in there. No, I mean my point is
you were in for that one.
I was in because I was like, what's happening? But my point was like that was all prelude. It was all building towards the Clone Saga. So when the trades, like when Comic Shop News had like teases of the Web of Spider-Man issue where Ben Reilly's re-debuting, I thought that the pitch was what DeMatteis had been building the whole time, because I'm like, I'm so conditioned at that point by his writing, because it's always about introspection and about the duality of man and about, the sorrow of the human condition. So like when they said Spider-Man versus Peter Parker, I was like, oh yeah, well he finally has a psychotic break, and we're going to have like the story where he finally like actually battles himself in his own mind.
Yeah.
And they were, and everyone at the comic shop was like, no, the clone's coming back, you dummy. And I'm like, what clone? Because I'm a child. And they're like, oh, in 1976, Jackal cloned Spider-Man and then he threw him in a smokestack. I'm like, well, then he's in the smokestack. Who cares? Like, no, he's coming back.
He survived.
Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Right? Yeah. Well,
so
now I'm trying to remember. I haven't read. Dude, this is so funny. I've been
Clone Saga?
Because I got this. Wait. I read the Clone Saga. I stuck with it every step of the way. I haven't reread it. Is what I am saying.
It's for the best.
Well, it's tough because as we were discussing earlier, I got this beautiful thing here. The challenge with rereading some of these characters. So even with Superman, let's say I was like, okay, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna reread Superman. So with some of the stuff, I just knew it, and I was able to flip through it, right?
Sure.
And it was like,
just to make sure you didn't fill in any gaps or like conflate it with another period,
which does happen, right? Like you're like, yeah, that happened, but it did not happen that way. That does happen.
Yeah.
But with Superman, let's say I was like, okay, I'm going to just reread all of 90s Superman. that was a fucking weekly book for like 12 years.
Yeah, it's not a small order. You're
No,
reading a lot of books.
That's a lot. I mean, that's a lot of comics to be reading. Like that's a full-time job. You're just like, all right, guys, I'll see you in 3 months. You know,
Exactly.
I'm digging in. And it's like, bye kids, love you. I gotta read Superman over here. This is the same thing with Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Because there is a moment where Spider-Man is like 4 books and you could just read them. But the closer you get to the Clone Saga, I forget what it was called. I know you're gonna remember. What is that crossover called? Where, oh my god, what is their asylum called? Is it Ravencroft?
Ravencroft, yeah.
So Ravencroft gets taken over. This is where Shriek is at and all this stuff, and then it's
by
right
Judas
before...
Traveler. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So that crossover is almost like a weird prelude to the Spider-Clone stuff, right? Because he appears at the
Ben's
end.
in it. Like Ben had already appeared. He like,
but he's like, it's a building thing.
Yeah, we're still building. Well, because the idea is that like Peter is insane, and he's already become the Spider, and Ben has returned because of Aunt May having a stroke. So like Ben is a shadow puppet, kind of like running around, but he's already established himself. We know that Ben Reilly exists. And so when they claim Peter, they're like, oh, he's broken. And they have kind of an Empire Strikes Back one where they're like, oh, well, there's another one.
Yeah, what is that called? Is it like Traveler's Song or something like that? What is that 4-part called, dude?
Yeah, I don't remember what that specific story arc is called.
I thought you were gonna have it. I thought you were gonna be.
No, I wish I did.
So there's no judgment because I'm blanking too. But
no, it's so horrible.
From that moment forward, you're talking about from that moment. Okay, you may not like what I'm about to say. From that moment to One More Day is basically one story.
More or less. I mean,
you're constantly dealing with it. Because even when you get to the stuff where it's like John Byrne came in, you were still dealing with what came before, right?
Yeah.
Like,
but I think up until I would say JMS. Like once you get to
you know what? That's fair. Digger. Yeah, once you get JMS, it becomes
once Mackie leaves, then it's a completely new animal.
Yeah. No, you're right. Once you get to JMS definitely does stand a little more alone. You're still kind of dealing with shit.
Even then, like, but JMS didn't read it, so like you could tell he's just like whatever, you know, because he played fast and loose with stuff where you're like, there should have been an editor on this. Like, no, I'm not throwing shade, but I'm saying like there's moments in the JMS run because I love that run, but I'm also like, oh, but you could skip this volume and you're fine. But also to make sure to be careful because JMS was like, oh, has Aunt May's maiden name ever been revealed before? I'm guessing not. So her name is Fitzgerald, and then it just came out like that, and people were like, not only do we know her maiden name, but it is the last name of a very important Spider-Man character that like 2/3 of the audience loves. How could you screw that up?
Dude, I didn't know that.
Or, hey, Eddie Brock, that's not short for Edward, is it? I'm betting it's short for Edwin. I'm going to put that in the book too. And you're just like,
dude, I didn't know that. I feel like I have to.
These are things where I'm like, this is what I paid attention to.
Yeah, this is the thing where I feel like at some point I have to do a reread of stuff because I'm like, so this stuff is just not in there as much, you know.
Thanks to the internet, by the way, people were like, Fitzgerald, how dare you? And then I think it was Steve Wacker back then was like, it's going to be fixed in the trade. Oh, so I don't know if they ever actually like fixed it, but
well, I wonder. I have all those. I got those. I have all those hardcovers, the JMS run.
Oh, nice
hardcovers and stuff. But that's the thing about when you get to these characters where it's like, I started rereading Amazing, God, a few months ago.
Yeah.
Before the beginning. It's fun because it's just, you know, these standalone stories and it's just, you get to kind of see the development of this stuff. And but there's like, it's almost like your brain just knows at some point this is going to become like so much. It's impossible to keep track of it all, right? You know, it was funny because I think sometimes people I'll hear this criticism about supporting casts. But when I was at DC, there was an editor who was really about supporting casts, and he was like, the best supporting cast in comics was Spider-Man.
I agree with that.
And he would go into this whole thing about the supporting cast, and he would talk about it all the time. And at one point, I had to basically like raise my hand at a summit and be like, you understand there were multiple Spider-Man books going on. I mean, like Spectacular
is completely different. Like
it was about this cast, and then this was his college cast, and this was this cast. It was like what you're talking about is because there were multiple books for that character.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, and there was a concentrated effort about that. It was
To
like
build that
this
up.
book
Yeah.
is about this. Like Spectacular is about the Bugle.
Right.
Right.
Glory Grant, her werewolf boyfriend. Like these are the stories.
These are the subplots for those books. And so
Thomas Fireheart, like that stuff is all about Spectacular.
Well, this is the thing about Superman in the 90s, because Superman essentially was a weekly book for 12 years. More than that, really.
Yeah.
They had so much supporting cast stuff going on. Like all the time. All the time. Like there was always something with the Daily Planet, with like
GBX, with Double X, like just once he died, the book was taken over by the supporting cast. Like there were 4 books that didn't star Clark.
Oh, I know. Well, the thing about the Reign of Superman is that it's weird how our memory remembers this.
Yeah.
Reign of Superman is like 3 months long.
It feels like a year because there's like 60 issues of books.
I know. Well, because that's the thing. Like, I mean, I think the one of the greatest tricks they did, it's one of the smartest tricks they did. Because it's crazy. Because like Superman dies. He dies in November. Then you get Funeral for a Friend. A Funeral for a Friend is like 2 months long.
Yeah.
And then Funeral for a Friend ends. And then there's a 3-month gap. And then you get Adventures 500.
Yep.
And all 4 issues of the like, and here's the new people, the Reign of Superman. You get all of those all in the same day, which is crazy. I remember I was talking to Dan about this because I was like, I'm not like crazy, right? That was all the same day. And he was like, it was all the same.
Yeah.
And then it became monthly after that. But here's the thing, because it was weekly, we're like, oh, so many books. But you're like, all you got to do is look at Superman. And here's the trick.
Yeah.
Superman 75 is he's dead.
Yeah.
Superman 81 he is 100% back. Not Superman.
True.
Not Reign of Superman. He is back.
Yeah, he's back. Physically alive again in the suit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the suit. Like, he's basically back. That all that stuff with him in the black suit and all that stuff, that's like issue 79, man.
No, yeah, you're right.
It's so fast. It's so fast. It just like boom, 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 boom. I mean, if you go, I was looking at some of the covers. What you should do is just pick one of the books. Don't look at all of them. Pick one of the books and look at how quickly they burn through that stuff.
Oh, I know.
I mean, the fact that they kept, I don't know how they kept Cyborg Superman was a villain a secret.
Dude. Well, I mean, they didn't, because I remember the solicit for the Adventures of Superman issue of him like throttling Superboy. And I'm like, oh.
Well, I thought they were just like, oh, it's a conflict. I thought it was going to be like, oh, it's Reign of Superman. They're going to fight each other.
Well, because they kept doing that. Because you had Eradicator fighting Steel, and you had Superboy fighting, I guess, Cyborg. And they set that up where you were like, oh, yeah, that's fine. That moment when Cyborg Superman torches those survivors.
Yeah, dude.
Such a mic drop moment. There's a moment, folks, if you're not familiar, folks, you should read the Reign of Superman. Superman. It's really cool. And it's like a lot of consequences. Yeah. I wasn't reading Green Lantern at the time. So like when Hal just shows up with a sling, I'm like, what's happening?
Neither was I. I wasn't reading Green Lantern either. I started reading Green Lantern. Dude, talk about a weird ass time, because it's like, we were talking about blind spots last time. And it's Green Lantern was one that like, I knew who Green Lantern was. I had read Green Lantern comics, but I wasn't reading Green Lantern monthly. Right. So, and I'm trying to remember, I wasn't working at the store, but I definitely was like the annoying kid at the store, right? I was going every time.
Right? Yeah.
So what happens is I pick up, I was obsessed with Superman in this moment. Like Superman and Batman were my books. Like every kid, I think at that moment, I was like, Nightfall's going on. This is like
Nightfall's happening. Oh yeah.
Here's Reign of Superman. This is amazing. It's like all this cool shit's going on.
Yep.
And I get the Green Lantern tie-in issue, because I'm like, which is Green Lantern 46. And so I'm like, I'm going to get that. And then I've always loved Green Arrow. So Green Lantern 47 is like a hard traveling heroes reunion, but now they're both like old and pissed off.
Yep.
Right? Like gray hair hood, longbow hunters. Angry, yeah. So I was like, this cover is amazing. The cover with both their heads on it is 47. So I read that, and then I read 48. And 48 is just like, Hal's going crazy about to kill my Green Lantern.
Yeah. Well,
it's like, And then the end of that issue was crazy because the end of that issue is like, and then here's some punk kid with his girlfriend on a beach. Who cares about that? And then he gets to 49 and he's just cutting off hands. He's killing fools. Stuff's fucked up. Then he gets to 50, and 50 he kills Sinestro.
Yeah.
Just breaks that dude's neck, walks in the power battery, comes out as Parallax, and you're like, this is the dopest costume ever.
Yes.
Daryl Banks is on fire, like nailing it. And then all of a sudden this punk ass kid gets the ring at the end.
Yeah.
And I love Colin here. I can say this because
he's great. Yeah, exactly. In a Nine Inch Nails t-shirt.
Yeah, and you're like, what just happened? This dude just like walked out of an alley at a club and now he's Green Lantern?
Yeah.
And then you pick up 51 and you're like, oh, we're going with this.
This isn't like a one-off. Like this is you were just continuing.
Then it was like I knew what was going on. It was like new Green Lantern and stuff. And it's crazy. I think this is why, like, I always talk about this where I'm like, certain generations have to claim ownership of things.
100%.
And that means you gotta really like upset stuff a little bit. You gotta introduce new stuff. You gotta kind of change things up a little bit to introduce things. And you know, it's interesting when people come on to books and they don't introduce anything, they don't change anything.
Well, that's like that's Spider-Man. Like that's just it's Pete until Ben, which is why I think people love Ben so much.
Yeah, because it was well, that's what we were talking about before. It's like the black costume. I guess these are the things we talk about. It's like Spider-Man has these moments where it's like there's black costume, there is Venom, but that ties back to the suit.
Black costume.
But then you have the spider clone stuff, and it's like all these things are these moments for Spider-Man. I have a question for you.
Yeah,
I'm sure if we talked about this before, actually, or not. Have we ever talked about how DC never had a true reboot? We talked about this before?
No, we've never talked about this. DC's never had a true reboot. Well, you mean because there's always a vestige left over, like something remembers the past?
About like okay, so because I'll say to people, they're like, "Well, Crisis," and I'm like, "When did Dick Grayson become Nightwing? Pre or post? It's before, right?"
Yeah, Jason Todd. He was already Robin.
Jason Todd's origin is
a mess.
Completely changed because of Crisis. I mean, you're talking about that dude, like, all the connections with Killer Croc, all that stuff gone.
Yeah.
But all the stuff with his parents, pretty much gone. Like, it's such a weird thing. But it's like, when you're talking, if we look at the history of DCU, the only things that really changed with Crisis were Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman.
Right. Because
Green Lantern, those stories happened. Like, obviously they did stuff. But then when you look at something where it's like the Teen Titans or the Teen Titans and the Titans, that almost acted like as if nothing happened. Yeah, it did, obviously, but you're like, when we're referencing Judah's contract like every freaking month in Titans, it's like that's pre, you know? Yeah. So it's like if you're picking up something, say, Identity Crisis, I almost called it Identity Disc by accident just now, which that's a weird dive in case anyone knows. It came out the same day too, which is super weird.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I remember being in the store being like, this is weird. Like, why would you do this?
Yeah.
But when you get Identity Crisis, and that's referencing shit from the Bronze Age, and it's like once we were in the 90s, it was interesting because they had certain goals where they were like, okay, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman are totally relaunched. They relaunched a bunch of books, they changed some stuff up, but then it's like, we're referencing Hard Traveling Heroes pretty quick.
Yeah.
And that's pre, right? So it's like we're stuff from the past pretty quickly, but Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman are brand new characters.
Like, I know, and that was really frustrating and baffling because of the history. Because if you just use the Titans as like a litmus test, right? Like those characters, they existed, they were partners, they grew up, they became these characters, they have their own team.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Superman and Batman barely know each other. So like when
I know
Superman
it's weird, which is why there's good stuff that comes from that because you get this Justice League book that is different. You get some stuff that's different.
Oh, yeah.
And at the time, it felt special whenever we saw those characters together, which adds power to when Grant comes on as JLA in '97. It adds so much power to it by the time we get to that because of some of this stuff. But it's like, you know, what was the other book I was going to say that had no changes to it? There was another book that I'm like, oh, we reference this constantly. Damn it, what was it? But it's
Devil.
Like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. Well, that too. Well, that's the thing. There's this character that you're like, we're referencing shit from
Booster,
Crisis. Well, Booster's post-Crisis.
No, he's pre-Crisis.
Is he pre-Crisis? Really?
I think so. Yeah.
But so that's the thing. It's like you have all these characters that are coming about. You're gonna look it up. All these things that are coming out.
February '86. So okay.
Oh, so he's technically post.
Technically
right?
post.
So it's like it's interesting how they were referencing stuff pretty quickly, and it gets muddy. Like I like that it was like we're gonna make a point that anytime Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman are around each other, that is a big deal. That
Yes.
is a big deal, right? And obviously they were acting like certain things were happening for the first time, and that's
Right.
totally cool. But it was like at the same time there were other books that were like 100% because of shit that happened
Yeah.
previous, you know. Dang, what was the other book I was going to mention? But anyway, so then we get to, so
New
that's the one
52
where
and
people are like,
stuff, and
that's
there's
the
yeah.
reboot. But then you get to New 52 and it's like Superman, Superman, Teen Titans, which is weird because Teen Titans is the one that gets hit. So
Yeah.
it's Superman, Teen Titans, Green Arrow, Wonder Woman
Yeah.
have some of the biggest changes. Batman, Damian is in issue 1.
All of them. There is a sequence in the first
I
issue.
know.
All the
Yep.
Robins are in the foyer. Like,
Yep. That issue, in a lot of ways, I've talked to Scott about this. That first issue of Batman is Scott in a nutshell in a lot of ways, because it's like he poses a question at the beginning. He has the inner monologue stuff, but he has page 2-3 is a 2-page spread with every Batman villain on it.
Yep.
And then the next sequence is Batman and the Joker fighting all his villains. It's like the most Scott like. I talked about this because I find that first issue to be fascinating as a first issue.
Oh yeah.
But they Aquaman, that was just a sequel to Brightest Day.
That's
picked
true.
up Brightest Day like right after, and Green Lantern, there's
no change. That just
no
kept
change.
going.
But the idea that there was no Teen Titans in that world, it was, I'm trying to think what other books there were. But yeah, those are the books that had some, and there definitely were books that had really big status quo changes to it, right? And
Suicide
really
Squad never
changes.
really recovered from it. Like, it's completely different.
Yeah, Suicide Squad is interesting. I think there's Suicide Squad can be tough at times. And in some ways, I don't know if I would say never recovered from it, because I think in some ways it created a brand. It turned it into a brand in a way it wasn't before that.
Exactly.
It's something that has to do with Harley.
Yeah.
Being the team and stuff,
And it turns out like that's all it took, was just put Harley on the team, and now Suicide Squad is a completely different brand.
Yeah, it was still Waller, but it changed the dynamic of the group by having some of those people in it. And then you had, I forget if that was Adam Glass's idea or not. If it was Adam Glass or if it was somebody internally that was like, we should put Harley on it. But then, yeah, it's interesting because those are the two moments. But it's like there has never been a wipe the slate clean start over.
Right.
It has just never happened. And
in
so
continuity, like, because there's like Earth One, and
it's a pet peeve of mine. It's a pet peeve of mine that people, anytime DC does a relaunch or a new #1, people call it a reboot, and I'm like, that word does not mean what you think it means. Like every time, like it's a relaunch, there's a difference, and it drives me crazy because for whatever reason, DC is the one that gets it.
Yep.
Like anybody else can do relaunches, they can do #1s. We go like, hey, we're starting the brand new story arc. Here's #1. When DC does it, it's like, oh, reboot, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Why are you calling it a reboot? It's like a weird pet peeve of mine. People call things reboots when they're relaunches, because I'm like, no, it's something totally different. It is a different thing. Like,
let me ask you this.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you know what? I'll let you finish your thought, then I'll
no, that's it. No, I'm done.
All right.
We can other stuff.
People have asked that, because in the same vein, people have suggested this, especially every time DC does a relaunch or a reboot. Should Marvel have a Crisis style reboot?
No.
Agreed.
I don't think they need it.
I don't think they need it. Their Saint Elsewhere, Franklin Richards time sliding scale is fine.
Yeah. I don't think they need it. But also on top of, I don't think they need it. They have created a weird way to have their cake and eat it too, which is sort of what DC's doing right now, right? Like, I mean, with All In, I mean, it really was like we talked about. Well, so basically, Ultimate Spider-Man is the version of that, right?
Yeah.
Like, it gives you what you want, which is a starting point. You know, it gives people an ability to pick it up and go, I'm reading this for the first time, and it's all brand new to me, right?
Yeah.
And it's different, and that's, I think what's fascinating is how Hickman is approaching it so differently, but he's still creating something that feels, it feels very accessible, very accessible. And that's what was our goal with All In and Absolute, was that it was 2019. We had been talking about, I mean, it was really like
Yeah.
2018, 2019, we were talking about this, and Scott and James and I, we were all sitting there talking about this stuff, and I was just like, you know, I was like, we need to do something like this.
Yeah.
Right. Like we gotta do something like this. We just kept talking about it. And I'm like, I think that's the way to do it. And Scott and I were like, okay, what if it was like this? What if it was like, what we eventually get to? I don't think it's a secret. Like it's two worlds, right? And so we were
Yeah,
like,
I think, and I love, by the way, we can say this, I think, and if not, I'll cut it. But like, we finally found out about the Elseworld.
Oh yeah, from death metal. Well, so this is what. So this is it. We were always planning like, oh, there's gonna be different worlds, right? So there's gonna be like a Mega World, the Alpha World, which will be called at the time the Else World. Like we were figuring all this shit out. We're like mapping stuff out, and we're like, okay. And then a lot of stuff changed.
Sure.
Like Scott was gonna go do create your own for a bit. DC company was changing, so it was like, but this conversation kept coming up of like, well, how do we do this differently now? And it was like, I remember specifically thinking about this and talking with them about this, and that idea of like what Scott has said in a lot of videos. There's like, oh, DC always tries to do one or two things. It either goes hardcore new, like New 52, or it tries to go backwards. I hate when people say backwards, but we try to go to core.
Yes.
Like Rebirth. And I was like, okay, well, here's the trick. You do both. We do both. And that was really where our heads were. Like, how do we pitch this? How do we do both? How do you make this work? But it was always like, they have to be connected from day one. They can't be two separate things. And there was a lot of, there was so many conversations how to make this work. And, but again, we talked about it, like, dude, like 5 years ago. And the fact that it's finally coming, and it's kind of crazy that it's like, some of the stuff that's happening is exactly the ideas we had 5 years ago. Like, it's so crazy to be like, and we actually had pitched some of this stuff to them in 2020. We were like, oh, what if we did it like this? What if we did it like this? What if this? And it just didn't work out at the time. And then this, it kept talking about it. And then when, Scott started talking about possibly coming back, it was like, well, let's do this thing. And it is funny how like some characters have changed and some pieces have changed here and there, especially in how it comes together. But a lot of the stuff we had planned back then is basically what's happening now. It's super. But yeah, so Marvel, no, I don't think they need it. I think at this point there's no reason to, and it's like, I think that the way they've structured that universe, they don't really need it. I
agree.
I don't think they need it at this point. So I mean, I'm curious if they would ever do that.
I'm sure it's always been a conversation. Like I bet every several years, like not every couple of years, more like every 5 or 10 years, there's a conversation. Usually, like if there's a dip in the market, I'm sure there's a conversation. Should we reboot? Should we do a big?
Well, that's part of why they did it for DC was because 2010. I'm always obsessed with the numbers. I'll say the real numbers. I'm always obsessed with like the actual way things are moving in comics and the market. And it's like 2010 was a really rough year, and for all of comics, and that's really what kicked it off. It was like 2010 looking at the market and being like, this is bad, and that's what motivated them to be like, we're pulling the trigger on this. With Marvel doing it, man, I'm here talking about like, man, you're talking about some stuff. I
know. No, it's such an unruly beast, because you have to have, you need the coordination, you need talent, you'd have to have your ducks in a row, because you can't go half cocked. You can't be like, oh, we're going to play fast and loose. This is going to be kept. This isn't going to be kept. You got to have a structure. You got to have a rigid plan. You got to have a publishing initiative. You got to have which books are going to come out. You got to make sure that those creatives can stay. Like, it's just, and then
there's so much. What's crazy is the person who would probably be, all right, I'm going to say something out of turn. maybe the person who would probably be the best at figuring it out is the person who would never do it.
Yeah.
And that's Tom Brevoort.
Yeah.
Like, Tom Brevoort would never do it.
He would never want to do that. He would never
want to do it. But he's the person that you would trust to do it.
Absolutely, because he knows the world. Like he knows
it. Core. So I think the idea that he could be the one to look at the math and be like, here's how I would do it. But he would. It's an interesting. All this stuff is like, it's like games,
It is. It's like fantasy football.
I love it. It's like I wonder. He did a thing. I've talked to Tom Brevoort about this because I learned a lot from it. Tom used to do a thing where it was basically like editorial role playing, where it was like a thing online. Do you know about
Okay.
this?
No.
He did this thing. It was on the Marvel blog and it was on his personal blog. And I've asked him if he would ever do it again. He was like, "There's no time. It was a lot of work." But basically, what he did was he created a game that was like Dungeons and Dragons for being a comic book editor.
I kind of love
I'm
that.
not a, and so basically what it was called Big Money Comics. And it was this idea that like a new publisher has started and they're called Big Money Comics. And you are the editors for this company and you have to make books that sell.
Dude, that's like a thing I've done on a show like 1,000 times. I love that
idea.
You
have to find it. And Tom was the dungeon master for it, basically.
Oh yeah, because he'd be able to he'd be like, oh, like, you know, the market.
Oh yeah, he'd be like, oh,
or
this book didn't sell well, or
there's a paper shortage. What are you gonna do now?
Yep, this person was late. Like he, and then you could use. I think you could use real creators, and he made. If I remember this correctly, I think he used Whacker as editor in chief.
Okay.
I learned a lot from that because he was basically like, it was an educational thing. Because he's like, this is what really happens, you know, and I think one of the things for me breaking into comics was that like I didn't really know a lot of writers when I was coming in. I knew like a handful. I knew a lot of artists, and so I was always talking to artists. It's made me sensitive to certain things. I hear them differently, maybe, I guess. But also editors. Like I would listen to editors. I go to panels, with editors, and I think I told you that story before, right? Where I went to it was at Long Beach Comic Con, and they had a thing where they were like, what was it? It was how to deal with an editor. It was a panel called How to Deal with an Editor.
No, I don't remember that.
Run by Whacker.
Okay.
And I was like, I'm going to that.
Yeah.
And Whacker at the time, I'm trying to remember. I think he was already. Either he was in the middle of doing DC stuff, or he was like on his way out the door. He might have already been editor on Spider-Man. He might have been when this happened. I'd have to look. He might have already been editor on Spider-Man. And remember, he had edited Hawkman and stuff with Jeff, and he was the original editor on 52. So it was like still in that little window, right? Before he left to go become. It's crazy because he went from 52 to doing triple ship Spider-Man.
Wow.
Like right
that's not a bad trial by fire because of the nature of the publishing for 52 and what a balancing act that must have been.
So he had this panel and it was like, you know, how to deal with an editor, and I went and there was like nobody there. It was just like me and like,
so it became this kind of like,
well, like two people showed up, but they sat in the back, and I was that dude. I'm like, I am here to learn, but also get FaceTime with Whacker, you know. So I was like, I'm gonna go and introduce myself afterward, blah blah blah. And then he was like, so he gets up there, and it was really weird because it was like a classroom. Oh. It wasn't a panel where there was like a big table and stuff. It was really weird. I mean, he basically was standing in front of us, like giving like a TED talk.
That's cool.
And he gets up there, and I had an embarrassing thing where my phone kept going off throughout it, and I could not. I got a new phone, and the phone was being weird. It was all annoying. But he was like, "Oh, I brought a special guest today because I felt like, you know, it shouldn't just be me talking to you about being an editor. I should have somebody here with experience." And he was like, "Jeff Johns." And so Jeff, and so again, cool. This is one of Jeff's like superstar time periods, right? I mean, you're talking about like he is the guy.
Yeah.
And so it was just the two of them, and they just talked about dealing with editors. And man, I learned so much from that, like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So much about editors' time, the things they're looking for, the things that drive them crazy in those 45 minutes. You know, I think it's interesting when I talk about trying to break in and the stuff that they get obsessed with and the directions they head in. And I'm like, sometimes you gotta just sit and listen. Like you gotta go to the, like, it's weird. It's part of why when some people come to me and they're really young and they're like, how do I break in? I'm like, here are the programs. Go to Comic Experience. Go to this. Go to this. Go to this. Like actually go to things where you can sit with people and learn, and then be around peers at the same level as you. Mm-hmm. You know, there's this. I heard this story, and I don't know who it was now, but there was a story about like a famous writer. He was doing a seminar, and somebody asked him. They said, "Do you think when you're starting off as a writer, you should try to become friends with other famous writers, basically? Like, should you basically chase down famous people to try to like learn from them, right?"
Okay.
And he was like, "I don't know the answer to that question." He was like, "I don't know for sure." And so he went home, and then he basically wrote an article about it. And he was like, "I have the answer to the question. It took me a while, but I figured it out." He was like, "No." He's like, if you form a bond naturally, organically with somebody, and they're willing to support you and mentor you, whatever, like that is totally fine. Totally makes sense. He's like, however, what I think you should actually be doing is going into spaces where there are people at the same level as you.
Yeah.
Because then you can grow together and work together and get to know each other together, right? Like, I mean, I've known Scott since the day I met Scott, the day American Vampire #1 came out.
Wow.
So we've known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, so it's like you come up together, and I
same class.
James.
You and James and Scott, yeah.
All these people, you meet them, and then you kind of build together. You work together versus like chasing this. And I see this sometimes. And don't get me wrong, there are writers who have built careers out of this, but who have been able to like, you know, chase people down and then latch on. But what my experience has been is it's better to, and I've seen this, it's better to try to hang out with people who are at the same level as you when you're really starting out, and try to connect and learn from each other.
Exactly. You're all going to make similar mistakes, or maybe different mistakes that you can both learn from, or you can all learn from. It's just the same as, you know, learning in a school environment where it's like, would it make sense to learn with peers or with mentors? And it's like,
and then you cheer each other on. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. You for each other that way versus.
And you have a community at the end of it, you know?
Exactly. I think that's a better way to go about it. I'm not even sure how I got to this.
I know, right? It was interesting. But we got to talk about so Batman and Robin, you're off the book. It's over.
I'm done.
You're out.
It's over. So weird. That was the hard one. It got me like really late at night one night. I was thinking about it, and I was like, oh man, that was a hard one because, you know, it's funny, like with Flash, Barry was me in a lot of ways, right? And like, there's parts of that book that I feel autobiographical about. I think I told you before, like, there's a couple issues where Barry is like, "Oh, I feel so sick." And that's because I was sick in those moments, right? I was going through like a dark time, so Barry would go through a dark time, you know, and but it was like with Batman and Robin, I have felt such a like protective ownership over Damian, and I always felt this desire to like save him. Like I feel like that's the best way to put it. It was like me trying to save this person, and feeling like I was really happy with the Robin story, the original one, right? Like, and I wish we'd be able to stick with that one longer. It was, I remember when I got the job on Robin, it was with the understanding that Batman versus Robin was coming no matter what. So it was like, this book is going to end at 17, and this is what we're going to do. And then it was like, okay, well then can I have a Batman and Robin book after that? And they were like, yes. So it was like, it was all this big built plan.
Yeah.
By the time I got around to also Shadow War was in that, like all these pieces we knew that at the time, right? And by the time I got to Batman and Robin, I was so burnt out already that I was struggling to put the same amount of energy into it that I was putting into Robin, or I put into Robin. Yeah. But I was like, my goal here is to I continue feeling like I got to protect this character. Almost to probably a fault at times, because that's the part of the challenge when you're working on these characters. You got to put them through hell.
Yeah.
I just wasn't in the mood to put Damian through hell. It's really what it was, right? And and so when I was talking about my schedule and me being like, I got to take my foot off the gas and trying to figure out, we never talked about this. Yeah, it was like you and I have talked about it privately. We don't talk about it here, I guess. But I was like, I got to find ways to take my foot off the gas. Like, I'm starting to burn out. I don't want to burn out bad. So I'm like, okay, let's look at this. I'm doing way too much. I've been doing way too much for too long. Where can I pull? And it was like, okay, I feel like it is time for me to let go of Damian, because, you know, it's like I've been working with this character for a while. I really love him. And really, that book was Damian's book always, you know.
Totally.
It was always going to be Damian. So I was like, okay, I'm going to let go of Damian. Mm-hmm. And it was just hard, man. It was a hard one. But I was glad that I got Juan Ferrer. I've known Juan Ferrer for a long time. And I've always wanted to work with him. And he and I had talked about trying to do something Batman related. So when he got suggested to do these 3 issues, I was like, yes, let's do that. like, it'll be cool. He can draw dinosaurs. He'll draw a dope ass bank. It'll be really fun. But then it was like, okay, how do I wrap this story up? And I'm like, what do I want to say last about Damian? And it was funny because I remember when I was writing the last couple of issues, and it took me forever to write the last one because I was like, I wanted to wrap up the Bane stuff. Originally, when I come up with the idea for the Bane stuff, it was going to be a little bit longer, right? We had talked about possibly going longer, but I was looking at everything, and I'm like, and it was the same thing with Green Arrow too, where I was like, I want these books to keep going. And with Green Arrow, we went from being a one shot to 6 issues to 12 issues to 18 issues to now being like, okay, it's a full on
ongoing series now. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so I'm going to make a sacrifice here because I think the best shot for both these books to continue beyond me is if they're a part of All In. Right. And Batman and Robin had kind of been to the side for a long time.
Yeah.
We weren't putting it in. It was not integrated into what was happening in the main Batman book very tightly, right? I would mention it, but it was very off to the side.
Absolutely.
And I was like, I think this is the time for all these pieces to get put back in. And like Green Arrow, the story had been kind of the side too, but obviously we got deep into Absolute Power.
Big time.
So I'm looking at all of it, and I'm like, the best chances for these books, the best opportunity for these books is All In. Is this moment where we're going to do a big marketing push. Like there's going to be all these pieces. Some of the books are going to be changing creators. I feel like now is the moment for me to do it. So it was like twofold. It was like, okay, is this my time to take my foot off the gas and like let these characters go, even though I really, really love them and I want to keep writing them, but the timing is just not right for me right now. So I was like, okay, how do I figure this out? And so but it was like, okay, All In, we'll do it at All In. My request on Green Arrow was, and this is why me and Chris Condon share that issue, and then I have the annual, was because I was like, I've put a lot of work into Green Arrow. I don't want it to end on the event. Like I want to make sure I have another thing afterward that I can do afterward that is like the actual final say. So Batman and Robin, it took me forever to write the last issue, and I was just like, I knew it, but I'm like, I didn't want to half-ass it. I didn't want to like turn in a partial script or anything like that. So I'm like, okay, how am I going to do this? And I was like, what do I have to say? What do I want them to say? What is the last thing I want to do? And I remember when I was writing the last issue, I got to the ending, and I had written it. It was good. I was happy with it. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this thing where it's a school counselor, but you're going to see it from the school counselor's point of view. So it doesn't matter who the school counselor is. Like it's just, it's a non-entity character.
I was waiting for actually a mic drop moment where like it turns out the school counselor's like Jonathan Crane in disguise, something like that. I was like, no.
Dude, listen, it was gonna be Hugo Strange. It was gonna be anybody, but
okay.
but that was the point. I was like, I don't want it to be anything like this.
Yeah, you don't want it to be like that moment. Yeah,
I don't want it to be a twist moment or anything like that. I mean, if I had known Philip was gonna do like a Hugo Strange story, I'd be like, fine. Sure. I knew that's not what he was doing, so I'm like, I don't want to do that. I was also influenced a bit by X Factor 87, where it was like, Doc Samson interviewing the X Factor team. And so I was thinking about that a bit. But that ends where it's him. I mean, it's Doc Samson. I didn't know.
Talking to a therapist. Like,
yeah. Well, also, they show his green hair and stuff. And then they show him straight up at the ending. Like, it's very clearly him at the ending. Yeah. And it made sense because of the connection, Pierre David and Hulk, X Factor. It made sense. But with this, I was like, it doesn't matter who it is, so I'm not going to make anybody. We'll do it from their point of view, and then it's just Damian talking to the audience, basically, is how I saw it, right? And then I got to the ending, and I remember I had written it, and I did, you know how I am. I do notebooks, I do the whiteboards, I basically figure it all out. And I got to the ending, and I was done, and so I'm writing the very last line of dialogue, and I was like, I am Damian. And then I was like, no, that's not right. Like, I'm literally like, as I'm at my laptop, I'm like, I am Damian. And I was like, nope, that's not correct. And I was like, it can't be I am Robin, because I feel like that has been so established. It's like all these bits and pieces. And I'm like, no, what do I actually want to say about this character? Like, what is the last fucking thing I'm going to put for this character? Because, comics are weird. I remember Scott said this thing years ago where he was like, the reality is life is long, life is not short.
Yeah.
And it haunted me. I remember it was me, him, Lemire. I feel like it might have been Scotty Young. There was a fourth at the table with us. I don't know who it was now. But we were talking about this, and Scott was like, life is actually very long. It was very interesting. It was like we had this whole talk about it. Yeah. And I'm like, there's always a chance I'll never write Damian again, right? Like there's always a shot of that. I mean, when I wrapped up Flash, I was like, I'm not writing Barry ever again. I've written Barry a couple times since then, like,
Exactly.
so it was
Yeah.
like, okay, but you become, there is a distance pretty quickly, especially once somebody else starts working on it. Like
Yeah.
you get a distance created very fast. So I was like, what is the last thing I want to leave this character? I genuinely love this character, and I feel like so often he's put into these boxes
Yeah.
that are negative.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
like, what is the thing I want to end on? And that's when I was like, oh, I am loved. And that's how I left it. I was like, I did it. I'm done. And then I was like, somebody at DC is going to tell me I can't do this. Like, somebody's going to be like, that's too much of a resolution for this character. You can't have it. And no one stopped it. Like,
All right.
the whole time as it was going out the door, everything, I was like, somebody's going to say you can't have him say I am loved. You just can't. You can't give somebody an emotional ending like that. What are you talking about? They can't. They
Yeah.
can't do that. And then no one stopped me. And I remember I was talking to Daniel Sampier. It was like that morning. I had finished writing it, and I was talking to Danny, and I told him the whole thing, and he was like,
Nice.
"That's real good. That's real good." And then I told them at dinner. We were at San Diego. I told it to dinner with because Paul had read it. He liked it, and so I was at dinner in San Diego, and I told Danny and Mitch and Mark Wade. And everybody else, it was a big table full of creators, but I forget who else was sitting with us at the end. And I told them the whole thing, and they were like, "All right, that's a good way to end it. That's a good way to end it." So I'm glad that I was able to end in a moment where I was able to give him this thing. The only regret I have with it, I was mad at myself, and I might try to fix it for the trade. Actually, is that I was in such a like burned out hurry, and also this is going on like pre San Diego. We're deep into All In. Like my brain is melting. I'm working on All In, Absolute Power, House of Brainiac, trying to finish this up. That I totally forgot to put Talia on the last page.
Oh.
And until it was too late, I actually emailed DC when I realized the mistake. I emailed them and I was like, "Hey, we need to find a way to put Talia in here. Like, I feel like we didn't put enough characters on the last page." And they were like, "Dude, we are out of time. We are out of time." And I was like, "Oh, damn it!" So, because I felt like I also don't like when people put Talia in certain boxes either. So I was like, all right, it's fine. You miss, you miss one. It's like,
yeah.
it's like when you run out of the house and you forget your keys, you put your like your wallet, and you're like way too far out.
Yeah,
At that
you're like,
point.
the
I
phone.
guess screwed the day.
Yep.
I guess this is happening. It was like
Yeah.
that. It was definitely a bit of a bummer with that. But
Definitely.
I'm proud of the work we did, and I think all the artists I work with, I'm really happy with.
Oh,
with
yeah.
the original series, with like, I got to work with Gleb and Jorge Corona and Roger Cruz, and it was like Roger Cruz is somebody I remember back in the X-Men days, like way back in the day, being a fan of, and so I was like, hell yeah, let's get this guy on this book. Because I mean, Gleb and I talked a lot about Joe Mad when we were starting Robin and stuff, so it was like, it was. I'm really happy with that, and the same thing with Green Arrow. I think the stuff we did on Green Arrow, I'm really,
Wow, it's
really
such a great
proud of.
book. Really exciting stuff, and I mean, I think it's fair to say, like you gave the character an opportunity that he hasn't had in a while. Where it's like he has an ongoing series. Like the sky's the limit for Ali at this point. Where
Ongoing
now,
series,
like,
but also it feels like he's connected to the DCU, and it's like has his family back because I mean that stuff is crazy. Like I mean. And it's funny because that wasn't my original intent. We've talked about this. It wasn't my intent to write a Green Arrow book. I was just like, you know how I am. I'm like, where's Connor at?
Right.
Where's he at? Like, I'm just like trying to find places for these things. And that's why I was like, when I, back in the day, back in good old 2021, which feels like a lifetime ago, but in 2021, where I was like, okay, I brought back Roy back from the dead. I brought back Connor. Like, I was just going through bringing characters back. And that was not the plan. It was not, and then this is going to lead to a Green Arrow book. Like, that just was not the plan. But I was like, I have to put these pieces. I don't know. I always feel like the best part of DC is adding, not taking away.
Yeah,
I was just like, how can I add as much as I can to this? Like, how can I add a mythology? And it's like, when I look at, Green Arrow, I was just like, he has this huge family of characters, all this mythology. You can still tell Green Arrow stories where he is by himself or having street level stuff. It's like he just has. I mean, look at Batman.
Yeah,
Batman has this crazy family,
family.
mythology. But you can easily tell stories of Batman just fighting crime in the streets. You can
exactly.
do it. You can do little detective stuff. And so Green Arrow, I was like, I got to find a way to go here. And it is interesting. I feel like by the time I get to, it's weird. Green Arrow has like two endings because it's like the last issue, 350, has an ending that resolves the stuff from Absolute Power, and then I have the annual. The annual is a whole other crazy beast of no one is going to know what to expect. You know about it. We've talked about some of it.
We talked about
No
it. I'm
one,
very hyped.
yeah, no one has any idea what that annual really is, and it is like it is going to be crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see how it
We'll see what
goes.
you get away with, but I got
It's
my
something
fingers
so
crossed that you get everything you want because it's going to be really
cool.
cool. And that's the one I'm looking forward to the most, which is so funny because it's like the end, but the end for you, but not for Ollie. He's going to keep going, and it's going to
No,
be
I'll keep going. I'm excited about that. I mean, it's definitely it's not bittersweet at all. I don't know. I feel
yeah,
good about the decisions I made.
that's great.
Uh, I don't think I was necessarily done with the characters, but it was 100% my decision. You know,
Totally,
I talked
totally.
about it a lot, and it really was. It was like, man, I'm doing way too much.
Yeah,
You know, I was doing so much. It was like, dude,
it's
it was
too much.
killing. It was
Yeah.
killing. Like, I
Well,
mean, you're talking.
you can actually trace it on this show where you can we've talked about like
Oh,
how Green Arrow happened, how Batman and Robin happened, like
yeah,
where all these how it snowballed into like where you are now or where you were until now where your only DC book is going to be basically after All In comes out, but like Superman, right? Like
Superman.
that's
Yeah, and I'm really excited about it. I mean, that's the
so
thing.
exciting.
And Mora, you know, like
Yeah,
Dan is great. I met Dan for the first time a year ago, and I was like, okay, we're doing Superman together. What do you want to draw? And he was like, everything. And I was like, all right, well, let's figure this out. And I told him, I was like, oh, it'll be Superwoman, it'll be Doomsday, it'll be all this stuff. And he was just like, I want to draw all of that. And it's funny because as the pages are coming in from Dan, I feel a challenge from him. Like I feel like,
go
oh,
bigger.
you can draw that. Well, I'm gonna make you draw. That's always the best part when you're like, oh, this dude can do it all. All right, how do I
Yeah.
push this? How do I go even nuttier? But then it's also like, how do I do more? Like, you know, also small moments.
Yes.
Right. Superman with Clark, with Lois, with Jimmy, you know, with Lex. Like, how do I do smaller moments on top of all this? And it's like, I'm not breaking the book where it's like I feel like, you know, what I'm looking at it is like I'm gonna do this huge Superman story, and it's gonna get bonkers, right? It's gonna get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And at first, it's like, oh, the first two issues are kind of this stuff, but it's building. You can see it's building, and then we'll have some other stuff that's coming, and you're just gonna see how it's building and building and building, and then it's just gonna get really huge. I mean, the first, it's funny, like I think when people read the first issue and they read issue 19, they're gonna be like, "Oh, this is very big." Like you could feel like we're just getting on like the tip of the iceberg about what we're gonna do with this book. And
Right.
but yeah, sometimes with Dan, like just talking with Dan about stuff, but then seeing the art coming in, I'm like, "Oh my god, dude!" I'm like, I gotta push it. Like I showed you, I think I showed you this morning. I showed you the Superman and Lois page where they're flying together.
Yeah, it looks so great. It's so like
Yeah,
hopeful and fun. It encapsulates like what it feels like to read Superman, and
yeah.
but it's like got this like ideal style, and you know, I am, you know, we've talked about this probably on the show before, but I'm not a big fan of like redundancies, despite the fact that we grew up on like Reign of Superman, where here's four Superman, but
Or Green Lantern,
or Green Lantern or all these other like, you know, flashes. There's like always a friggin' speedster. But I love the inclusion of Lois as Superwoman in this story.
Mhm.
Just the visuals of her flying next to him and being like, we
Yeah.
haven't really seen this like in continuity outside of like
Not
kind of
not like this.
oddball off story.
Well, there was the stuff that was going on at the end of New 52, and
Yeah.
the stuff with Superwoman, and then the stuff with Lana. It's like I feel like we've skirted around it, but to actually just like let her feel it. I mean,
Right.
the first two issues are pretty they're pretty fast paced. The first two issues, and by the time we get to 21, we get to take a bit more time with her.
Yeah.
You know, because I definitely want to. You know, it's funny when I was in Bendis's writing class, like a lifetime ago. Now thinking about it, I'm like, oh my god, that was like it was almost 15 years ago. When I was in his comic writing class, one of the things he said that always kind of stuck with me was he's like, you have to have characters react to things.
Uh-huh.
Like you react to what they're saying, but they need to like slow down for a minute and actually react to stuff. Like, what is the actual reaction to this thing that is happening around them? And that's always sort of stuck with me. And I think they're right. Like, you should have a moment where somebody is like, this shit's crazy, right? Like, what's happening is crazy right now.
Yeah,
right?
a Spielberg moment
Like,
where, like,
so,
because that's
yeah.
there's so many moments. Well, every Spielberg movie has a shot where the characters look at the thing that
they get to experience the thing. I mean, look at you look at
Jurassic Park, any movie.
Yeah. You got the characters got to soak it in for a moment. They go, this is happening,
right?
And so with this, it's like I want to make sure that it is Lois saying this is happening, but also Clark, right? Like Clark is happy, but he's still concerned because there's a mystery to how Lois has these powers.
Absolutely.
So like, okay, what exactly happened? And that is a building mystery across the book. Is how she got them, and I think people will be surprised how she actually got them. And so it's like, we don't answer it immediately. Because there is a time gap between Absolute Power and All In, which I don't think is a secret anymore because in the preview pages it says 52 days later. So it's like there are things that happen. I don't think that's a secret. It's in the preview pages. So there's a gap there, but it's like, so I want to make sure these characters are actually reacting to stuff and having like, like Lex is reacting to things. Like everybody's reacting to what's happening around them, and I show it. So, but it's funny the way I always kind of describe issue 19 is like it's all fun and games until Doomsday shows up.
Of course.
It's like, oh cool. Superman is like, this is fun. Me and Lois get superheroes together.
Yeah.
And trying to balance both lives is new to Lois, right? It's like it's one thing, and she kind of talked about it's one thing to be told something or kind of be around something, it's a different thing to live it. And so, she's starting to live this life of a superhero for the first time. And so there's some different dynamics with that. And then boom, here comes Doomsday. And Dan Mora's Doomsday is so cool.
I can't believe it. Like, I can't wait to see that.
Dude, there's a part, I'll show it to you later today.
Yeah.
There's a part in the second issue where oh man, I almost spoiled something. Okay. But there's just parts where there's like fights happening, and then Dan, I would be like, I would write it one way script, and then Dan would just take it and just level up like crazy. It would just be like he would add that extra flair to it, and you're like, oh man, it's like, oh dude, he is nailing it. And I'm just really happy with everything Dan is doing. I'm very excited, and it's like the stuff we have planned for Superman for this next like massive arc. Because I feel like the way I saw the first year of my Superman was like, okay, it was weird because it was like all building to the Brainiac stuff, and I felt like that was one big chapter. Was like, because I feel like Absolute Power is like an interlude,
right?
But it's like I feel like issue 1 all the way to House of Brainiac was one big story because it was all building to this Brainiac stuff because there was like pieces that came together, and now I'm in like part 2 land, right? It's like I'm in the sequel to that, and it's like some stuff that was seeded in the previous stuff will carry over. So like obviously stuff with Lex. There's been a subplot that I have been seeding from the beginning. Like I've been gradually hinting at it and having characters kind of mention stuff about it, and then that'll come to fruition in like a major way. And I'm really curious to see people think about it because it's definitely something that is like it's out there a little bit.
Okay.
And so, but I'm really happy with it. I'm really excited. I hope people check it out. FOC is coming up pretty quick on this. So if you haven't read Superman a bit, you should dive back in and check out the new stuff.
Yeah.
Dan Mora's art is really, really amazing. I think by the time this airs, we'll start releasing more and more of his art out into the world. I've given Sal an image of the Superman
It'll be in the episode. You'll see it.
Superwoman, flying. There's all kinds of stuff we'll put out there, but I think next week, and I'm trying to get the PDF done. It's on me. I have to go back through it. I'm always, whenever it's like the beginning of a story arc, I'm the same way with G.I. Joe #1, which we'll talk about in the next one, where it's like I am nitpicking it. I'm like, I could write that line over. Art stuff is great. Like Tom and Jordy killed it on G.I. Joe #1, but I'm in here being like, this is my responsibility. Making the letter hate me, being like, I have more changes. But it's the same way with the Superman book where I'm always like, I just keep looking at it and I'm like, I just want to make sure that we're giving people something that is a feels like a fresh start for the character and is an accessible jumping on point. It still carries the stuff before. Like, oh, that's how I am as a writer. It's like I will always honor what came before. So it's
Right.
like really build out this stuff and then do something new with it. But then again, Dan Mora's art is just him and Alejandro, who also colored Dark Crisis with Danny. He's coloring this, and it's just like every page looks so damn cool. It's really like it's one of the highlights of my day. And Dan Mora also is like the fastest artist in comics, so it's like I'll have bets with other writers because like Dan will turn in a rough at like 9 a.m, and I'm like, all right, everybody, let's place our bets. When is Dan gonna finish this page? James will be like 5 o'clock, and I'm like, I think he's gonna be done at 1. I think he'll be done by 1. And then somebody else will be like, oh, it'll be done by this, it'll be that. And it's like, well, what's the page? What's on the page? What's he doing on it? You know?
Yeah.
What's happening on it? You know? And then it's like, and then it'll be like 4 o'clock and here's the page. Sometimes sooner. There's been a couple times where it's been like 2 hours later and I'm like, how is this possible? And then it's like, I can never miss a deadline with this person ever.
Yeah.
And then I go back and I look at the scripts and I'm like, oh my God, I got to figure out more. I got to like, what other crazy thing can I give him to draw? And it's really, really fun. So I'm hoping people pick it up and they see what we're doing with it. That it is like, I feel like what we're doing with Superman really does deal with a lot of the stuff that is the all in stuff, right? Like the core line all in. A lot of the spirit of that is being carried in the Superman book. And obviously ramifications from the stuff that's going on in that will impact it. So I'm hoping people will really come in and check it out and love it, dude. I don't know. Yeah. I'm really hopeful with it, mostly because I want to be able to look at Dan's art. Dan's art is just insane.
I know it's awesome. It's a must read. You got to check it out, folks. FOC's coming up. Make sure pre-order the book. Grab it. Yeah. And we want to thank you so much for like doing Green Arrow and Batman and Robin and just bringing these great stories to us. We're really lucky to have them, and we can't wait to see what's next from you outside of Superman. And of course, G.I. Joe's on the horizon.
Yeah, there's always more.
There's always something from you, but.
I always take my foot off the gas, but like not really.
Yeah.
Like, it's always like, there's all kinds of secret stuff we haven't announced yet and things I'm working on. It's just a matter of timing. And I think that like the last few years being so all the time. I mean, you have to think about this too. When I started on Flash, it was a double ship book.
Oh my God.
And it was like, so I've been going hard for a very long time. I remember back in 2015, in that year, I think I had a book out like every week that year, and that's before Flash.
Right.
So it was like I was always releasing stuff constantly. I remember did we talk about this? There was a moment. Well, I told you that like in the last 10 years, I released 500 comic books.
Yeah, that's right. It's just unbelievable.
My brain is like,
yeah, it'd be nice to like
I was explaining to somebody, we were talking about this, and I was like, going from doing 8 books a month, doing 4 books a month, like, 4 books is still a lot, but I feel like I'm finally like getting into like okay, here's the real groove here. Here's this, and being able to slow down and be like, take a lay of the land, right, and look out and be like, okay, what's next? What's the fun stuff? But for now, I'm really excited about Superman. I'm very pumped that people are gonna get to check it out really soon here. It'll be like a month from now you'll be able to check it out.
Right, and that all-in flip book is coming too, and man, can't wait. It's gonna be
dude.
We'll talk more about
that. You liked it, because if you hadn't liked it, I'd be like, oh no.
Yeah, I'm like, oh man, what the hell? No, it's dope. It's really cool. The concept is great. The art's fantastic on both sides, and the implication, like my hope is that like it makes people excited for DC, like not like they need to be, but like they're that they get back on board, because it's like it's exciting. It's an event.
Yeah, it's a fun moment. It's something different, and we didn't want to like I think that's part of the all-inness of it is that like we're coming off of a really big event cycle.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you're talking about even going into Dark Crisis. There was so many events going on and so many like crossovers. And then last year we had so much. And then now, we're coming to the other side of this, and now you can tell it's much more about like these are these books. Right. And so I'm hoping people come in, they buy all in, and they see what we're doing, and they go, oh, cool, this is this connective tissue, but I can read these books that I like, and then start picking up the books, and then seeing the plan over the next few years, what they're putting out there, and how you can. I don't know. Yeah, we'll see. I'm very excited about it. I'm really proud of all the stuff that that we were doing at DC, and I'm hoping people check out All In, but I also really hope you check out Superman 19.
Superman 19, folks. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean that Doom. The teases you've been littering throughout of Doomsday, homaging his return from the cage underground. It's so cool. Just exciting.
Now he's coming back from hell.
Hell,
so crazy. Yeah, you'll see when you. I think people will be interested to see how people react when they see Dan Moore as Doomsday, because we haven't shown him in full yet.
No,
we've only shown him. I think I'm just gonna say screw it and put it online next week or this week. I think I'm just gonna be like, look how dope this is.
Yeah, so cool.
Look at it, you know. Yeah, but there's some really, really cool stuff coming.
Exciting, man. Well, thanks for doing this as always.
Always,
such a fun show to do. We really, really appreciate it. And of course, check out everything that we talked about everywhere. We'll see you next month. By the next month, it'll be
G.I. Joe and your Terminator.
We'll my Terminator book. Yeah, that'll be out by the time.
Yeah, I know. So next time we can talk about Terminator. We'll talk about G.I. Joe. Oh, it's awesome. I'm so excited.
Oh, man. All right. So long, everybody. Thanks for watching.
All right. Thanks, everybody.